in the Western culture, we're very death avoidant. People don't want to talk about death. And I don't think that's actually true. I think that we're not ever given a comfortable place to talk about death, and we're not given people to talk about death
Today's
with.
guest is Symon Braun Freck. Symon is the founder of SBF Creative, a creative consulting firm, and AI Death Doula, a startup dedicated to making end-of-life care practices accessible and digestible for all.
At all. I feel like there's evidence to back up that our consciousness is not wiped out. I just don't claim to know exactly what it's going to look like when you die or where we're going. I am constantly shocked when I'm talking to people, mainly because I didn't know much about near-death experiences until I started interviewing people, which is
Symon's research explores the intersection of technology, culture, and death care, known as Thanatechnology.
I think we are able to make a bot that thinks, feels, acts, looks, talks like someone you know. And so I don't think that is a conscious being. I think a conscious being has to make choices on their own. But one thing you mentioned was like a lab grown brain, or there's a lot of like stem cells that can be grown, or that is a mixture of technology with what we know of as consciousness. And like, can we use technology to kind of have an extension of ourselves? And I think we do know we can. There have been like technological revolutions over the course of time that have made the impossible become possible. So I'm never one to say never.
And now for my conversation with Symon Braun Freck.
If you want to learn how I went from being a skeptical atheist who thought there was zero chance of an afterlife to a skeptical atheist who thinks an afterlife is highly probable, come check out my books. WTF Just Happened.
Hi, everyone. Today I am speaking with Symon Braun Freck. Welcome, Symon.
Thank you so much for having me, Liz.
Sure. Do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah. Sure. So I have worked in a bunch of different capacities in the end-of-life care space. Starting when I was 12, I started hospice volunteering. And from there, I went into studying thanatology. Simultaneously, I was studying film, and I've kind of married the two. And I now run a YouTube channel highlighting end-of-life care professionals, and I help interview on about 5 other YouTube channels related to near-death experiences or death and dying in some capacity. And in addition to that, I also run a death tech startup where we try to incorporate technology into end-of-life care to try to give people more autonomy in their end-of-life care choices.
So I have lots of questions. Well, first of all, what is thanatology? I'm not sure everyone knows that.
Sure. So thanatology is the study of death and dying. So like the root of the word is Thanos, like the god of death, Thano. And then that's death. And then ology is the study of. So it's just the study of death and dying. And it can go into a million different types of study, whether that be like medical or anthropological, but it just really means the study of dying.
And you said you started volunteering with hospice when you were 12. Is that right?
I did. Do you want me to? I can go into the story a little bit.
Yes, please, because most 12-year-olds, I can't think of anything most 12-year-olds would be more terrified of, including myself.
I think most people definitely, because we don't have a basic death education at all. We don't really talk about death. So it is quite scary for most people. I had always been more comfortable with death than the average kid. But when I was 12, a series of my great-grandparents and grandparents had died, but my papa, who is my mom's dad, died when I was 12, and he died in our home with in-home hospice. And it was the first time that I really got to see the entire death and dying process. And I got really intrigued by all the things that I thought were going well and the things that I thought could be better with the hospice system. And so I came back to Utah. He died in Virginia, and I had stayed there the whole time with him. And then I came back to Utah, where my parents live, and became a certified hospice volunteer. And I was 12, and so I was the youngest hospice volunteer that they had ever had in the state of Utah. And I absolutely loved it. I had to go through the same training as everybody else, like get all my HIPAA training and everything. And then I was allowed to sit bedside with patients at the hospice facility. I wasn't allowed to go do in-home hospice then, but I was able to help run activities, help be there during the entire dying process, and then actually there during the death and post-mortem if needed. So it was a really interesting experience, and I continued doing that for many, many years.
Did you see anything, like weird, like people talking to their loved ones, anything, any of the deathbed phenomena that we know about in kind of afterlife research world?
Yes, I most definitely did. I would say the most I don't know what the word would be. The one that like shook me the most was actually with my grandfather, not with the patient. I think because I was just closer to him than I was to anyone else. But well, as he was dying, was like reaching out to try to, it seemed like he was trying to hold someone or like hold a hand or something. And he actually was screaming a lot when he died, which is not uncommon when people die. And a lot of times the families are very scared by that. Like, oh, are they going somewhere bad, or are they really scared in this experience? For what I've learned in my research, that isn't the case. It's often just your like body's response to dying. You might be seeing something, you might be seeing someone, and that's how you can communicate at the time. But that was definitely one of the more interesting experiences, is seeing him actually like reach out and yell to someone. Other things that I saw over the course of the patients who I sat bedside with would be talking to people who aren't in the room, or a short period before they die, you become a little bit more awake and lively, and it often gives families a lot of hope. But really, we know that that means you're about to die soon. So I did see that quite often. Those are kind of the more common phenomenon.
And what did you think at 12? Like, did that shape your view of if there's an afterlife?
I would say I grew up in a non-religious family. Like, we did not practice anything. My mom came from a Catholic family. My dad's mom was Jewish. His dad was Presbyterian, and they weren't really raised with any religion. And so we grew up with no religion in my household. So I never really thought of an afterlife. Pre-12, I would say. It wasn't not a conversation. It just wasn't something we talked about all the time. And since then, I would say I have gotten more and more confused about the afterlife. I do interview near-death experiencers, and everyone seems to have a similar experience, but with a different connotation that's kind of mirroring what they knew during their lifetime. And so I would say I've actually gotten less clarity the closer I've been to death, but that brings me more peace. I think that people see or experience what's comforting to them, and they're able to hold on to that as they're dying. And I think that's really beautiful.
Now, when you say you have less clarity, do you mean less clarity as to whether there is an afterlife, or less clarity to what an afterlife would be?
Less clarity to what an afterlife would be. I think that I do believe the near-death experience stories when I'm listening to people tell me them. So I take people at face value when they're telling me like their truth. And so I think that for a lot of people, the afterlife is what they saw or what they feel and what they think it should be, and that's what's comforting to them. For myself personally, I don't know what my afterlife will look like. Does that make sense?
It does. And you know what? That's not so different than if you had never come to this life and people told you about it. So,
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
you
And I think this life is different for each individual. And so I have no reason to believe the afterlife to be different than that.
but you don't think our consciousness is wiped out when we
I do
die.
not. No, I do not think our consciousness is wiped out at all. I feel like there's evidence to back up that our consciousness is not wiped out. I just don't claim to know exactly what it's going to look like when you die or where we're going. But I do think that there's evidence that whatever the essence of a soul or whatever consciousness is. I don't know if I actually know there's not an exact definition right now that is used commonly. But I think that lives on whatever that is.
Yeah. I would guess there's probably like, I don't want to say infinite, but just close to infinite types of consciousness we experience and dimensions, and probably many different material ones like our experience here, some non-material, and probably different forms of non-material we can't understand, and probably different forms of material that obey different laws of physics than we do here. There's probably just so many different experiences that we have that make up like our me and our individuality, and this life's like one experience, and that would be my guess.
I agree. I think it's not dissimilar to our actual life where we are here and we're taking in all these different inputs, things we've been taught, people we've met, and it's going to shape who we are. And I think that who we are, the essence of us, is what that consciousness is. And I think that does extend into the afterlife or what you might experience or what you might see. And I feel like the evidence, I don't know if we can call it extremely like set in stone evidence, but the evidence that we see is people who do have near-death experiences typically see or think or feel the things that they had imagined they were going to, just it's exponentially greater with the amount of love they feel or the colors they're seeing or the experiences that they're having. But where they are is similar to what they had hoped for or had imagined if they do have a positive experience with their near-death experience.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Like, I was raised very similarly to you, not religious, never talked about an afterlife. I still don't think there's a God. I don't even think that's the question regarding an afterlife. That's a whole other question. I think just the question I always say is consciousness created by a brain or downloaded by a brain? And even within that, created by a brain, you could still live multiple lives. It's just the memories most likely wouldn't carry over unless there was somehow some DNA, if it was linear through your family. I don't know. I mean, but really that's the question, I think. But it would make sense too that in a way, the first, because we only have information from a near-death experience of people who experience the most tiny, minuscule portion of transitioning and then interpret it back through their human brain. So it would make sense, I would think someone, if they suddenly felt a loving presence and saw a bright light and they were, and maybe if they got a little closer and they actually crossed, they'd be like, oh, that's my friend who I knew in my last life, John. And I was trying to process it. Whereas like, if they were raised religiously, they might come back and say, I saw an angel and God. And, someone not religious would say, I don't know, this amazing light and I felt love. And then, yeah, if they crossed over and didn't come back, they'd be like, the love, oh my God, it's my husband from 2 lives ago. I missed you so much. Like, you just don't know. But of course, I would think, and I'd like your opinion on this, one of the reasons people see sort of what they expect, at least when they communicate, is they interpret it as they communicate through their understanding. Would you agree?
From what I've heard and the amount of people I've interviewed, I would say I agree. I definitely can't say that for a fact, but I would imagine just like we take in everything in life, it's through our own perspective and it's based off of what we've been taught before. And so I'd imagine, yes. Also, you only have language that you've been taught before. So if the language that you know is that you're going to see an angel, that's probably what you're going to call it. I haven't, there have been a few people who I've interviewed who will have a completely different religious experience to what they were raised with, but they always have had that language or that model available to them to use those terms to call what they're seeing an angel or whatever it might be, an archangel or something that they're experiencing. I have not yet met someone who just like pulls out vocabulary that they had never heard before. But I think that's because we see things like through the lens that we know and what we've been taught.
Is there a near-death experience guest that you've spoken with that just blew you away? Is there a story that you're like, what the fuck? That's so evidential or so mind-blowing?
Honestly, a lot of them. Um, I am constantly shocked when I'm talking to people, mainly because I didn't know much about near-death experiences until I started interviewing people, which is an interesting way to get into it because typically it's the other way around. You like have a near-death experience and then you really want to hear about other people's. Mine wasn't like that at all. And so every time I hear people speaking about their experience, it's so true to them. And you can truly hear like how genuine they are being with you and how open they're being with you. I would say one that I found really interesting was I actually went to middle school with a girl who had a heart transplant, and during her heart transplant, she had a near-death experience. And this was
When
so
you were
interesting to me.
kids or like years
When we were
later?
kids, yeah, in middle school. Um, and I never knew that. And I interviewed her for one of the YouTube channels. And so I got to learn so much more about her and her perspective based off of it. And what I found very intriguing about her story, was that she was sitting on the edge of a mountain, like on a cliff. And we live in a very mountainous place, and I wonder how much like our short-lived experience influenced her near-death experience because we were so young. A lot of people who I interview have had near-death experiences when they're older, and they have a lot more to look through and to like think about and have their life review about, and she didn't have that. And so it's interesting to me whenever I interview people who have near-death experiences as kids, what they see often differs from adults.
Now, does that make you think when I hear that stuff, I'm like, oh God, that makes it sound like they're making it up? Because I could make up a whole story and add all visuals, but I can't include things I've never known about or learned about. And I could, so what what do you think?
I do not think they're making it up. I think that it
And let
is
me
so
clarify, I don't mean lying. I mean their brain like a dream or hallucination. So
I I don't think so. I think it's possible. I think that there's evidence that your brain actually fires in different ways when you're having a near-death experience and when you're dying to show that it's probably not just like a memory that you're having or a dream that you're having. But I do think that it has to be interpreted through the lens that you already have. You can't all of a sudden become a different consciousness or a different person. And so you're going to bring your true self into that story. I also think that what's so real to me when people are telling me about their near-death experience is more the emotion and the feeling behind it, and less like, do I actually believe this one little detail? To me, that doesn't really matter. Like, it's not crucial to me to believe you if I know that you recount every single thing you saw. It's more important to me that you're able to like articulate what you went through and how it changed your perspective now. And a lot of people I interview do focus on that. It's less on like what actually happened for those 6 minutes that you were dead, and it's more how did my life change after that? And oftentimes lives change drastically. It's very hard. A lot of near-death experiencers come back and they their marriages don't work in the way that they used to because they just had this different experience, or they're a different type of parent because they learned something that they didn't know before. And so I think that to me is what's so real and true about it, is that the people who have had a near-death experience really take what they've learned or what they've experienced and are able to apply it to this lifetime.
Now, regarding your friend who you said you didn't find out till years later, but she'd had it as a child, was she different than the other kids? Did she seem more mature or more perspective?
She, in my perspective is she was different. I don't know if I would say more mature. It was more she was able to like live life as if she could die tomorrow because she knew that she could. I think that was a big difference with her compared to the rest of the kids that we knew. She kind of just did what she wanted and she really took advantage of everything. And I feel like that's a lesson we all should be learning because we could truly all die tomorrow. But specifically with her, like a heart transplant, you don't typically get a second heart transplant and they do not last forever. And so I think she, from what I understand and what she told me when I was interviewing her, is she's hyper conscious and aware of that and is able to live every day knowing that life is fleeting. And I think that is a lesson we all should be taking from her book.
Oh, she has a book. What's her book?
Oh no, not her actual book.
Oh, sorry.
Her book of life.
Her book of life. Okay, I was like, definitely want to give your friend a shout out if she has a book, or anyone who has a good story. But got it. And but do you think that her perspective is more from having had a near death experience, or more from having had such, a facing of our, of our limited life and the fact that we're all terminal, and facing that at an age most of us do not?
I think that they're very intertwined. From everyone I've interviewed, it seems that you can't have one without the other because you don't really have a near-death experience unless you have actually died. And so it's hard to separate the two and to know if the lessons you're learning are from the near-death experience itself or from the fact that this person has died and been revived. I think from almost everyone I've talked to, it seems like their life completely changed after this moment, and they felt that there was some lesson they had to take back and implement in this lifetime. I haven't really met anyone who is like, I didn't bring anything back with me or didn't learn anything. Everyone says like there's a reason I came back. Even if they were given a choice to come back and they didn't want to, they feel like there was a purpose for them coming back to this life. And so I think it has to be a combination of both the fact that they actually died and they know life is short and the fact that they had a near-death experience. I think also added on to that is I always ask people what they think about death now and their own mortality. Are they scared? Are they more scared, less scared? Are they comfortable with it? And overwhelmingly, people who have had near-death experiences are not scared of death itself, and they're not scared of what comes after death. What typically worries people is who they leave behind. And I think that's a sentiment people who haven't had a near-death experience can relate to as well. It is more scary to leave this life than it is to actually die or actually go on to something new.
Right, because I would assume it's because you're hurting your loved ones. They're going to grieve no matter what they believe. So I know a lot of you have heard me talk about the Forever Family Foundation. They were absolutely instrumental in helping my grief and in changing my view of the probability of an afterlife. They use science-based testing to certify psychic mediums, have a scientific advisory board, and they host grief retreats. They will be hosting a special grief retreat this October in California, only for parents who have lost a child. The founders, Fran and Bob Ginsberg, who've become like parents to me, although Fran sadly passed in 2020, started the foundation after the passing of their daughter, Bailey, so helping grieving parents is dear to their hearts. This retreat will have psychic mediums and speakers. While they host many grief retreats during the year, having been through it themselves, they understand the unique type of grief and the safe environment needed for those who have lost a child. For more information and to sign up, go to foreverfamilyfoundation.org. I'll also have the link to this retreat in the show notes.
Yeah, so let's move on a little. You say that you do research in Thanatechnology. First of all, what exactly is Thanatechnology and what are you doing?
Yeah, so Thanatechnology is a combination of thanatology, so the study of death and dying, and then how to use technology in that space. There are some amazing researchers out there in the thanatechnology realm. I am fairly new to it. I've only really been in this space for the last like 3-ish years. Before that, I was very much focused on cultural anthropology and thanatology and how do different cultures physically speak about death. And what I have morphed that into now that I have a more techie background, I was an AI consultant for a few years. Um, I realized that there is all this language that people don't even know to use, so they can't look up is there aquamation or terramation in their area. They don't know how to look up, can I keep a body in the home for X amount of days? Because we don't have a basic death education in the US. And we don't have a very open death culture. We're very death avoidant in the US. And so we don't even have the vocabulary needed to be able to search what we want to search to have a death that feels like us. And so the reason I think technology and thanatology can go hand in hand is that people are able to then search what they need to be able to find the resources that will be helpful to let them have a what's called a good death or a death that feels like them. And it is so crucial for people to have a basic death education to be able to even go out and search these things. And technology is just like one way to push that along. There's a bunch of other studies in thanatechnology, like memorials online, or what happens with social profiles after someone dies, or a million different things. It could even be the technology behind aquamation and how do we actually deteriorate this body using
Yeah, I
water
was going
or
to ask
anything.
you. You used two words I never heard of, aquamation, and what was the other? Terramation? What are those?
Terramation. So, part of what I am extremely interested in with using technology to push along the study of thanatology to spread it to the masses is teaching different terms, particularly with alternative burial practices. So, what most people know about being buried is that you're either in a, it's not called traditional burial anymore, but for it's called conventional burial. But lack of a better term, what we think of as the traditional, you're in a casket, you're put into a vault in the ground, and you're buried. That is your conventional burial practice. And then there is cremation, which most people are aware of cremation. It might not be what your religion does, but it's the second most common way to be buried. And then after that, there are a bunch of other ways that people can dispose of their remains. There's sea burials, there's terramation, which is you're kind of put into a pot and made into fertilizer. So terra, like the earth. And then you're like they're like cremains, but they're terramated remains are given back to your family. Then there's aquamation, which is the same process as cremation, just using water, if that's one way to think about it. Obviously, you're not like being all not like enveloped in flames, but you're enveloped in a chemical compound that breaks down your body. So that's aquamation. Then there's green burials. So that's when you're buried in the ground, but without any casket or anything that cannot be disintegrated with your body. And typically there's not like headstones or anything in those cemeteries. And there are a lot of other ways to be buried. But to me, what's so important is people knowing the words so that they can look up, can I do that? Or how do I do that? Or how expensive is it? Because a lot of the alternative burial practices are actually more affordable, if not the exact same amount as the more conventional burial practices. So that's my long spiel about alternative burial practices, and why I'm interested in technology and Thanatechnology and combining both. So people know they have more options than what your local funeral home might be able to offer you.
I think I'd want to do a green burial. What?
I do too.
Yeah, we're both really into climate. I know we talked about
Yes.
that. Yeah, my other job's in climate. So what is and what do you think about? I cannot remember the name for it. Like I've heard it cryogenics. So it's where you freeze your body
Yeah.
and brain with the thought
Yeah,
of
your head.
your head or maybe your whole body with your thought and hope to revive yourself when technology is better. Do you think that's going to work? Is that what? I don't even know what to ask about that.
I wouldn't ever be surprised if it works. I think that there have been like technological revolutions over the course of time that have made the impossible become possible. So I'm never one to say never. I don't know if it's going to work. Um, I do know it's extremely expensive. I don't think it's a very accessible burial practice. But if you can do it and you want to do it, I would never shut that down. I think it is not as common as it might seem to be because people do know about it. But it's not something that you can kind of like walk down the street and go find a funeral home who's gonna let you go freeze your head or your body there. But I don't know if it's going to be possible. I think it's completely feasible that there are brilliant scientists out there who can make that happen. But it is not currently ever been proven to actually work. But I think it's a really cool idea. One thing I will say about it is we're, this is in Western society specifically, very focused on living and being younger and prolonging our current life rather than having a safe, healthy, comfortable death. And I think wanting to revive yourself or come back after hundreds of years or whatever it might be is kind of like feeding into that culture of wanting to stay young, stay alive, stay here. And I'm not sure if that is what I personally would want to do. I would rather be able to die a really good death and know that my remains were safe and know that my consciousness might live on in a positive, happy way. So, obviously, to each their own, but I do think that it feeds into a Western ideal that is relatively new.
Yeah. I don't know what I think about it. Like definitely a little question, a little more thinking there's an afterlife. I used to be like, oh yeah, I would definitely do that. But now I'm like, I have very mixed feelings. It depends the age. Like you were saying, our society liking youth. Like I don't want to freeze my 90 something body and be regenerated as like an old, I mean, uncomfortable. Like, I mean, I it's wonderful. You live to 90. What a gift. And like, I want to talk to people with that much wisdom all day. And I have so much respect. But like, if you're going to freeze your body, like if I found out I was terminal now, maybe, or certainly like 18, but
do you really want to do that, to be regenerated, to still have all the health issues and complications and, struggles that you have if you live into your old years, to like freeze it, be revived for a few years, and then you're most likely, I don't know, maybe we don't know. A part of me would do it for the curiosity, because I think, I'm so fascinated by this stuff that even if like I was like 90 and then was regenerated, I think I'd be like, oh, that's so interesting. They've accomplished this. And maybe there's technology that they can restore my body to much younger years. Who knows? Like, it would be a curiosity thing. And there's so many questions I have about it. If it's done, will their brain just bring their identity back? Will it like zap them out from another dimension where they've had like, I don't know, like 10 other lives, and then they're zapped in, and then they come with so much wisdom and are like, oh my God, I was living this life. Are you pissed? Are you like, I mean, this would like make a cool movie. Like, you're living this great life. It's like in 400 years and you suddenly die because your consciousness is pulled back. Like I mean, that would get very sci-fi fiction. My guess is it wouldn't work like that, because if they think our consciousness is like one central base, which is non-physical, and it divides up into little bits into all these other parts, it is the most fascinating thing. And I think we'll learn a lot. That's my take. But,
I think it is definitely, if you are invested in like the science behind it and the what if, it's a really cool thing to do. I agree. Like, we have no way to know what actually is going to happen. And in terms of the, will I be 90 and die in a few years? Maybe people's hope is that they have this new like scientific revolution where we are able to bring back our frozen bodies, and so you can live forever or whatever it might be. I'm just not convinced people really want to live forever. I also think that listening to near-death experiencers, when they come back to this life, a lot of them like don't want to, or they would rather be in that other realm. And so I'm not sure if those people are somewhere else for 400 years and they snap back to this body, if they're gonna like regret a decision they made 400 years ago. We just have no idea. We have no way of knowing. But it is just another big like revolution in the alternative burial practice space. And to me, it's exciting that people are putting more energy and effort into alternative burial practices, because it means we're going to have a lot of advancements in the funeral industry. And the funeral industry has this bad rap of being kind of like antiquated and just old and sitting inside a little tiny funeral parlor somewhere. And that to me is not what the funeral industry is. I know a lot of really like young, fun, cool people working in the space. And I think every technological advancement we have proves that there are like really interesting minds working in funeral burial practices, end of life care, and it isn't an antiquated space. It's something that anybody can get into.
And so you said you thinking to develop technology to get the words out. How are you planning to do this?
So I run a startup called AI Death Doula. And what our goal is to compile a huge database of all things end of life care, whether that be, can I bury my mom in my backyard in a little town in Missouri, or is it, can I have a sky burial in a particular country, or whatever question you have. Is there an afterlife? Like something that even we can't physically prove with whatever documents we'd upload to this database. The goal would be that we can have a personalized database that can feed you the answers you need for your geographic location, for the type of death that the patient's experiencing, for the relationship between you and the deceased, whatever we can personalize, be able to have a chat-based system where you can ask the questions that you might be uncomfortable asking a human or that you don't know how to ask a human. What happens a lot of times is people do know about hospice and palliative care, and so they are willing to have a hospice nurse in their home, but they're probably not going to ask that hospice nurse the more taboo questions, or they just are uncomfortable that they don't even know the answer in the first place. And when you look things up on Google, you don't get very personalized or specific answers. You get very generic answers. And when it comes to end of life care, they aren't going to be location specific. And it's very important for it to be location specific because end of life care practices, burial practices in particular, vary county to county and city to city. And so you do need something that is specific to who you are, whether your religion be different or your like just cultural background is different. It's going to change the answer to whatever question you might have. So that's our dream, is to create a large database where people are able to access niche information that we feel should be just general public knowledge.
Love that. Yeah, and that would you like have an app for this, a website, all of the
We
above?
we currently have an app. It is functioning, but we need a lot more data in there, and data is not very accessible and it's pretty hard to compile all of this data. So we're working on it. We're starting in like smaller geographic locations, trying to really nail that. Because the other thing about the topic of end of life care is we cannot give wrong information. It has to be information that is fact-based, that we can absolutely check and say for certain we know that, or we need to be able to refer you to someone who is able to give you that specific information. So the secondary goal would be to put together kind of a collective of death doulas, death midwives, palliative care physicians, hospice nurses, whoever it might be, so that we know who to refer you to in your specific location with your specific need.
And I'm just going to ask, I don't expect you to know this, but since you mention AI and you seem to know a lot about death and technology, do you have any thoughts on AI and consciousness? Could AI be conscious?
I do not think in its current state AI can be conscious. The way that a large language model currently works is that it is fed in a bunch of different data points that we have generated as a human species forever, and we can collect it. And this AI bot can feed back information in a unique way. You'll see often that if you're using Claude or ChatGPT or whatever it might be, that it spits back things in kind of like a consistent sentence structure, or it just kind of sounds like AI, people would say. It's because it's pulling from what it knows. And so I don't think in its current iteration that AI can be conscious. I do think that it maybe one day, I'm again not gonna say it's never possible, but I don't think we've like cracked the code to making it an autonomous being who can make choices without any human input. Even just building the AI system, the language model needs to have a lot of human input there. And then to use it, you need a human on the other side. So I think not currently, but I think that gets to your very first question of like, what even is consciousness? If we can't define consciousness in its like current state, then maybe it can be conscious. I just don't know what the exact definition of consciousness is. And so I don't think we can say that AI is currently something that can become a conscious being.
Right. And Yeah. I sometimes like don't even I have questions along those lines. I'm just trying to think the wording because we don't really have the full language for understand consciousness enough to sometimes know to frame the questions. But do you think that there could ever be a technology, maybe not even AI based, or most likely not AI based, but actually a type of technology that could either become conscious the way, like I've heard about, the way our brains develop, and I've heard about lab grown brains? Or do you think there could be a technology, given our consciousness is non-local and quantum entangles with our brains, some permanent technology where our consciousness can do that, and that our loved one could just go into it, talk to us, we could have like a nice dinner, and then they would go back to the other side? Or
I think that something along the lines of your loved one being able to be inside a bot and talking to you is already here. That can happen, but it's not who you think it is. It is like a downloaded amount of data about a person into a system that is able to regurgitate information that's going to sound and think and feel like that person. And so I think that is here. I think we are able to make a bot that thinks, feels, acts, looks, talks like someone you know. What I don't think is possible is for that to happen without human intervention. And I don't think we're at a place where these bots are generating their own outputs. It works on a very like coded basis of amounts of inputs equal a certain amount of output. Um, and so I don't think that is a conscious being. I think a conscious being has to make choices on their own. But one thing you mentioned was like a lab grown brain, or there's a lot of like stem cells that can be grown, or uh, embryos can be grown, for example. That is a mixture of technology with what we know of as consciousness. And so I think that is a very similar conversation to what we might be having. Like, can we use technology to kind of have an extension of ourselves? And I think we do know we can. There's like prosthetic limbs that can function connecting to your brain and actually move based off of your own thought. That to me is like the closest we are right now to having a conscious uh, technology out there, or the combination of technology and consciousness.
Hey everyone! I'm really excited to let you know about the science and spirituality salons I'm now hosting. During these intimate events, a scientifically verified psychic medium will give all of you readings, and I will give a talk on the science and evidence that changed my mind about an afterlife. This will also be an amazing opportunity to get to meet some of you in person or virtually, and to share more about all the science and data that transformed my worldview and got me through my worst days. These can be hosted in your home, in a nearby cafe with a private room, or they can even be virtual. I've hosted a few already, and they were really special, fascinating, emotional, evidential. So if you're interested in getting a small group together over dinner, brunch, drinks, coffee, to learn more about the science and to get evidential medium readings, send me an email at hello@wtfjusthappened.net and put science and spirituality
yeah,
in the
I
title.
guess like some technology based thing that would be more like a medium, but you wouldn't need another person. So it was actually not just you experiencing the consciousness of your loved one as if, sort of pretending. That other sounds like pretending. And to me, I understand some people would love that. To me, that would just make me so much sadder. Um, it wouldn't work for me. But something where you don't need to go to a medium, and your loved one, like, I don't know, they would like text you. They could, I mean, because there seems to be ways, you know, based on signs. Well, first of all, we know with spoon bending, which I've directly experienced, our consciousness can influence matter. And it seems non-physical consciousness can influence matter. Experiments. Well, there's still a lot of questions about that, but it does seem to be, like they make a feather fly across the room or something, possibly. But if that's the case, it seems there's some way they could somehow, they play with technology, and that somehow we could develop a technology where they're texting us.
Yeah, I think that from my understanding, I'm by no means a scientist in the field of mediums here, but I have interviewed a few, and from my understanding, there are certain brain waves and connections that are made when a medium or a psychic or whoever it might be is connecting with someone from the other side or some information from the other side, and that you can see in their brain that there is a different pathway being created than a normal thought or memory. I th think if we could nail down what that is, we could potentially create a system that mimics that. But I don't know if that's happening right now. But I do think that would be the way I would think to go is like studying the brains of a medium as they're communicating with someone on the other side, understanding what connections are being made, and then trying to code those same connections in a bot or some other form of technology.
Yeah, I guess one question it just hit me, and I have to ask a medium this at some point. Um, I haven't asked questions at Forever Family Foundation in a long time, and I used to ask them all the time. But now I feel like my questions can't be answered. But now here's a new one. And you're not going to know this, but it's just a really good question. It really seems to be the question of how much of the medium themselves is the medium using their brain to get the information for you that they're able to see and process and, see, hear, however, versus someone on the other side needs a brain to be able to communicate with other humans living in brains. And a medium's able to step away more. And because, in one sense, I've kind of, with all this research, I am at the point now, and I cannot say this is a fact. I've come to think, in one sense, we're all living as mediums, and our, like me, Liz, is primarily, on the other side. That's where most of my consciousness is. And it's mainly entangled in using this brain and body to live here as this individual at this time. And same with you as Symon. And mediums, and then when we're just on the other side, we're just not connecting with any physical bodies. And, I think we have used terms like the other side, but it's probably just multiple sides and dimensions. I would guess string theory is the closest we have to understanding levels of dimensions, but who knows? And so if we can mimic a brain that's not attached to one individual person or animal, and somehow it can be used for them to just come in all the time, because a medium, they can do it some, but the medium has a right to be themselves, and have their own lives. So somehow mimic a brain that's not attached to an individual, this.
Yeah,
And
it's making me think of a few times when I've been interviewing mediums, I've asked them, do they think that it's something special about them? Like, are they chosen to do this? And the answer I've always gotten is no, anybody could be a medium. Not everybody knows how to like tap into their brain in that certain way. And I'm going to like butcher the quotes that they actually said to me, but my interpretation of it was that if you are open to it and you are able to train yourself to do it, that anybody could have the capacity to talk to someone on the other side, as we were talking about. And
I
so
think
I
that,
think,
yeah, because I've
yeah,
experienced it. But
exactly.
I guess my
And so
point
I
was,
think
oh,
you
sorry, go
could,
on.
no, it's okay. I just think you could train any brain to do it then. If that is the way that mediums work, is that they're able to train themselves and it's like a skill that we can become better at, then there's no reason we couldn't train an external brain or product or whatever to do the same thing. I just think we would need to understand exactly what's happening in order to mimic that same process elsewhere.
Yeah, that'd be fascinating. But I guess I don't know if this was clear. And what I also meant is every person's existing as a medium and that we are communicating regularly with one individual, and that's ourselves. And then, because we're existing from our main conscious on the other side. And then mediums are we're probably able to all let in little bits of information from other beings that are trying to like help us or communicate with us along the way. And mediums are able to just do that a lot more self-aware of it, or a lot more. And we can, that is my guess. I don't know if that was clear because it's such a weird conclusion. So I don't know.
No, I
But
do think it makes sense. I think all the time people have like deja vu or they have these memories they don't know where it came from or like little messages from people. And I think some people like mediums are just more in tune with that or they're more willing to accept it. I think a lot of it has to do with like, do I want that? Do I want a message right now? Do I want to talk to whoever it might be? Do I want this memory from a past life or do I want whatever I'm being given? And if the answer is no because you are trained not to believe that or to not want that for some reason or another. I think that is what stops people from communicating. And I think it's also discouraging to people who like really want it, but they aren't getting those messages or they don't know what the messages are, so they're not seeing it. They're like, oh, like this isn't real. I don't know if I believe that. I feel like I've talked to a lot of mediums who I do believe have some sort of connection that they're able to tap into. I think other people might not, and they're trying to like profit off of it, and that's a different conversation. But I do think everyone has like a ability to see beyond just this one perception of the world.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's even the theory that we're constantly nonstop communicating with the other side all day and we don't know it. It's like they're just giving us information like, oh, go down this block instead of this, go to this store. I mean, we make just constant little decisions that we're not even thinking about. Like, oh, let me go at 2 o'clock instead of 1 o'clock to this. Let me send my resume here and not there. Go to this dinner and not this one. Just nonstop. We're making little decisions and we don't really understand. We can all rationalize where those decisions come from, but for all we know, it's someone on the other side. Like if you think of any of those that were super significant, you're like, wow, I was debating between two parties. I went to one and I met my husband, or I met my next business partner. I mean, best friend. It's just it constantly. Or maybe you never would know. You just went to a party, had a normal night, and at the other party would have been someone you would have dated, maybe married, and it would have been okay, but wouldn't have been the person who was like the real love of your life. And you would have never known that. I mean, and someone was stopping you. You have no idea if that, to the extent of maybe that's going on all the time, all day.
Definitely. I mean, you could see it as like, oh, it was like a simple twist of fate, or it was like someone else interfering with my life, like telling me not to go, or like people listening to their gut feelings about something and just not doing something because it didn't feel right. Like we don't know where that's coming from. And I think different people, back to the conversation of like the language that you're using or the what you've grown up thinking it to be, I think you call the same phenomenon something different. I think that people experience the same things, they just call it something different. And then we feel so distant from one another because we're not using the same language. But in reality, we're like basing our choices off of the same gut reaction or guardian angel or whoever it might be telling us to do something.
Even luck. Like I think a lot before setting all this, I would have just said, oh, luck,
dumb luck, coincidence, but sometimes of just very good intuition, but and we don't know. Maybe it's a combination of all of it, from reading micro expressions on someone to someone helping us on the other side to some luck. I don't think luck doesn't play a part in anything at all anymore. Um, but yeah, do you think luck and coincidence still are even in the picture?
I personally believe in luck, and I also believe I very much believe in karma. So I think a lot of like lucky people happen to be very nice people. I think that even the people were like, oh, they're like such terrible people, but they're like super wealthy or whatever it might be. Like we don't know what else is going on in those people's lives that might be unlucky or might be bad for them. So to me, I think of like little tiny things that happen in my daily life as luck. And I think that when you put good energy out there, good things happen to you. And I think some people are more primed to see the good and some are more primed to see the bad. And if you focus on the good, I think more good things happen.
Have you ever had any weird communications from the other side, signs, messages?
Little tiny things. For example, after my mom's dad died, there was he died in my mom and papa's bedroom, and there's like a little walk-in closet right to the side of their bed. And up on the very top shelf, there was this clock radio that like wasn't plugged in. No one had used it in years and years and years. And went right the night he died, he was taken out of the home. And in the closet, that clock radio started playing a song that was like, I'm free, like don't worry about me. That was like the most real and most like sure sign. But there's been other little things. I think that or I personally like feel people or feel energy in certain spaces or just when I'm around something that might give me a memory or a feeling of someone. I think that that's a way someone sends me signs.
I mean, that clock radio one's pretty amazing. I assume you
I,
know Michael Shermer's story too.
oh shoot, you just cut out. What did you just say?
I did. I assume, do you know Michael? That reminded me of Michael Shermer's story, which I assume you know. Do you know
No, I
that
don't
one?
know Michael Schumer. Who's
Ooh.
that?
Ooh, I'll do a really quick story on this. So
Yeah.
Michael Shermer is complete skeptic, anti-medium, anti all this stuff, but very intelligent, evaluates things intelligently, has, as most of the people who are skeptical and insist this isn't true, hasn't delved into like the Windbridge research and all the stuff we delve into. Um, but he wrote an article that everyone needs to read. I address it in my book. It's called like something like when my skepticism was shaken to the core. And it was his wedding day. And his wife um was having a really sad moment. They were getting married. She, I believe, was from Germany, but they were getting married in his town, and a lot of she felt far away from a lot of her family, and her grandfather was the person she'd been closest with in her family, and he'd passed away. And as the ceremony starts, or I forget at what turning point, but it was like a very significant part. They hear music and they hear music and they're trying to figure out where it was coming from. And they found his old clock radio playing. I forget, it was some significant song. And it was like the clock radio was broken. And it was, old fashioned, not fixed ever. She just kept it as a memory of him. And then it stopped as soon as they were done with their vows. And he said it just absolutely made him question his skepticism. And
Yeah, that gives
I
me
mean,
chills.
he stayed skeptic. Yeah, yeah, and me too.
I think it's important to be skeptical because you can't believe everything. I just think that it's important to also not dismiss everything. Like there's a certain level of like, oh, that maybe isn't just a coincidence and you want to look into that. I think that being skeptical keeps you curious. And I think it's so interesting to me to talk to people who are more skeptical about everything. I know when we first started talking, you're like, oh, like I wasn't always like into this and this isn't what I always believed. And I like that. I think that it's important to be able to like change your perspective because I know I change my perspective all the time. You have to when you take in new amounts of information or data, you have to change what you're thinking. Otherwise, we're a pretty stagnant being. And so I love stories like that because they are special. And I don't think anyone can claim to know exactly what happens, but you definitely know something's there. I think the other thing that I experience all the time that isn't me, but my boyfriend sees ghosts all the time and I don't see them ever.
Ugh.
But I will like feel something in a room and then I'll talk to him like a day later or whatever. And he's like, oh, did you see that ghost in there? And I'm like, no, I didn't see it, but like I could feel something was different. And I think there's always like an energy when someone dies. I know I feel a shift in the room when I'm in the room with someone who has just died. And I get that similar feeling when he sees a ghost in the room. So that's my other experience with something being around me that I'm not in tune enough to see, but that I know that there's something there. And it's always so like reassuring when he is like, oh my God, there was a ghost in there. Did you see it? So that's my other common experience.
And to clarify too about from what I know about your boyfriend, he's like a finance guy, like really left brained. He's not like you would not meet him. I haven't met him, but from what you told me a little about him. He's
Sure,
not the
no.
type that you would think, oh, he goes like he
No,
sees
he's
ghosts.
very like finance, like golfs and watches sports all day. Like you would never think he would see ghosts. But I think he says he thinks it's because his dad died when he was young, and he thinks that he can like see different spirits. And their family has different things with like lights flashing on and off all the time. And so I think that he must just be more in tune with people on the other side than I, and I'm kind of jealous of it. I wish I could see the ghosts too, but it is something that I feel like lucky. There's that luck again that I get to like be around him and he is seeing or feeling something that I don't see or feel.
I would love to be able to see ghosts and whatever he experiences. Yeah, and I guess we're going a little past an hour. Is it okay if I ask you like one or two more questions?
Yeah, of course.
Great. What would you say is like the biggest what the fuck out there that you've either experienced or learned about maybe hosting your podcast?
I was thinking about this question when you sent it to me. I to me, the biggest what the fuck is how many people have experiences with a near-death experience, talking to someone on the other side, or just had a death in the family who died in their home and they had no idea how to talk about it. And the biggest what the fuck to me is anytime I post something about this, how many people will reach out to me and be like, I've always wanted to talk about this experience I had, but I had no place to do it. Or this happened to me and my family isn't comfortable talking about death and dying. And so I've had to keep this bottled up. And the reason this is a what the fuck is I have been taught in my Thanatechnology undergrad, master's, whatever, that in the Western culture, we're very death avoidant. People don't want to talk about death. And I don't think that's actually true. I think that we're not ever given a comfortable place to talk about death, and we're not given people to talk about death with. And so I think I'm always like shocked that if I post the smallest thing, people then see that as a safe space to tell a whole story or something that is like the most uh like formative and kind of like tragic stories in their life. And they're willing to just share that if they're given a little bit of space. And so I think we really need to do better as a society and as humans to give people the opportunity to talk about the most universal thing that we all go through. Like we all have someone die in our lives and we're all going to die. And so my what the fuck is like, why is our society so sure that we're so death avoidant when I don't think we actually are?
Oh, that's great. I feel like that's a perfect thing to end on, unless is there something I was going to
No,
also ask you what do you think the best evidence of an afterlife is? But I feel that was the whole conversation of our podcast. So unless you have something else to add to that,
I don't. I feel
okay.
that's how I'm feeling. I'm feeling just like everyone, if we just gave each other a little bit more grace and a little space to talk, we would really reverse this death avoidance that we have pushed as our narrative for a while. And I don't think it has to be our narrative.
So lastly, let us all know, remind us where we can find you, follow you, any websites for your business or the podcast you host, whatever you want to include.
Sure. So to find me, I have a website. It's my full name, symonbraunfreck.com. On there's my email. It's just my full name at gmail.com. I also have a website for my company, AIDeathDoula.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn with my full name. I am very responsive, so I would love if anybody can reach out to me about truly anything.
If you want to learn how I went from being a skeptical atheist who thought there was zero chance of an afterlife to a skeptical atheist who thinks an afterlife is highly probable, come check out my books. WTF Just Happened. To get more information on what the fuck just happened, go to WTFJustHappened.net. There you can order my book, WTF Just Happened, A Sciencey Skeptic Explores Grief, Healing, and Evidence of an Afterlife. You can learn all about how I came to conclude that there most likely is an afterlife, but you can also learn about the early stages of my grief and the amazing, fascinating people I met along the way. You can read about how much I harassed the mediums and scientists trying to get evidence to see if the mediums were cheating and see if what everyone was saying actually was true. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to stay updated on any new developments and any interesting new what the fuck updates. So if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It makes such a difference, especially for a new podcast like this one. And if any of you have had a crazy what the fuck yourself, have any questions, feedback, or just want to say hey, reach out on either Instagram at WTF_just_happened_ or email me at hello@WTFJustHappened.net. I love hearing from all of you. It makes my day hearing your stories and questions and feedback and all of it. And remember, you don't have to draw any final conclusions as you wonder, what the fuck just happened?